it, it seemed a beautiful, smooth, happy home delivery in which I was in control. But as soon as Doran was born, I felt he was agitated. I felt his eyes seemed to be moving from left to right, giving me an indication that well, it looked as if he was thinking, something's wrong, something is definitely wrong. Things shouldn't be like this, if you can attribute that kind of sense to a newborn baby. But around me, everybody was saying, oh, it's wonderful, you know, you've got a son now, your life is going to change, everything is going to be so good. You're just a bit overwrought. Don't worry about it. So I had this duality, strange duality of myself, feeling deep consternation that there was something wrong, and Doran was trying to tell me this, and the people around me who were trying to shore up the situation and make me feel comfortable and good in the kindest possible way.
I first met Linda Scotson back in 2014 when I went to meet a friend whose son was having oxygen therapy. The clinic, based just outside London, was thriving, with every single treatment bed being used, and there were many trained therapists working on other children. I was immediately moved to tears after viewing the before and after photos displayed around the clinic showing the incredible results of Linda's technique. This had clearly brought profound and very visible life-changing benefits to these disadvantaged children. It was quite obvious to me that what was being done here was nothing short of a miracle.
I still felt so worried about Doran. So he was breastfeeding, as I mentioned, but he was very anxious. And he was also yellow, but no fuss was made about this. So for the next 3 days were really painful for me because I felt sure that something very sinister and awful was about to happen, and nobody else accepted what was going on in my head. And then I realized that Doran hadn't had what should have been the statutory heel prick test, because I read through some of the books that I had bought and wondered why they didn't give it to him, to find out whether the liver was functioning properly with my blood supply going through it. Now, not long after they had begun this, to take the blood away, Doran started to seizure.
Doran Scotson was just 3 days old when his mum was told he had serious brain damage. From that moment till today, she's worked on developing her technique, a sort of gentle massage and manipulation, to improve his condition, refusing to accept the doctor's diagnosis.
I felt that a newborn baby has a huge amount of potential, and I couldn't see why normal development should in some way be so horrifically blocked by this brain injury when surely brains continue to grow. When we got to the hospital, they were waiting. And so they took Doran, but they couldn't do anything till they tested my blood. And that was, of course, when they realized there was the blood incompatibility. So Catherine took Lily and they went to stay with some friends of ours. And Doran had 2 full exchange blood transfusions, followed by phototherapy. We were there for a week, and then I do remember I was told I had to go down and they would explain to me what the situation was. And I knew as I was going down in the lift that by the time I had passed through this, I would be a different person, that I could never go back. And it was a strange feeling because I had always wanted to do something myself to address the suffering in the world, and because I knew the joy in the world. So, and suddenly Doran was now, I was alone with this responsibility.
After years of study, Linda opened this centre in East Grinstead in 2002. Hundreds of children have been through its doors. The treatment inspired by the success Linda says she's had with her own son.
So the doctor was very sweet. He did his best. He told me it was a hopeless condition, that Doran would not be able to communicate at all, that he wouldn't be able to sit. It was a very severe condition called connectors, and in his case it was going to be impossible for him to recover in any capacity. And they looked at my situation and said, look, I feel you would be quite justified in considering putting him into care, because you won't be able to cope with him at home. You've missed a lot, because I love this child wildly. I'm delighted with him. I really don't care in one regard if he can't see, hear or move. There is some essence of him that I know, and I love him and he loves me, and why on earth would I forgo that? And I couldn't see why normal development should in some way be so horrifically blocked by this brain injury, when surely brains continue to grow.
It was then that Linda set out on a journey of research that would lead to her discovering a therapy that would change the lives of those with Doran's condition and many others who also had diaphragm issues, if only more people would come to hear about it. We decided we had to tell this story because we knew it could bring a huge positive change to so many people's lives.
But I felt, so you've survived so far, and I was beginning to question what I had done and how I felt that there had been a shift. Now I would say what I was doing was he was with my breathing. So he was getting my breathing pattern through. And so he was getting an interrelationship between my breathing pattern and my movement. And one of the worst things that you can do after brain injury is to cause further stress, emotional stress. What I did for Doran was to reduce his stress as far as possible. Otherwise, it exacerbates the lesion, the brain lesion.
The technique Linda's been working on since her son was a boy aims to improve oxygen intake to help the brain repair itself. Samuel Perkins is 3. He was born with mild cerebral palsy, which affects his left side in the way a stroke might. His parents come here regularly.
He couldn't lift his arm above this height. I don't think he could even lift it that far. Now he can swing it about. It's free, it's really freed up his shoulder, and he's begun to use his hand.
And on the Horizon programme there was a speaker called Professor Patrick Wall, who was head of cerebral studies at London University, and he was talking about brain plasticity. Now, I was beginning to develop a theory that the injured brain couldn't be left to its own device, that after a brain injury, clearly other systems were affected. And it was clear to me that the respiratory system was affected. If the respiratory system was affected, then it had to affect oxygen delivery to other bodily organs that were metabolizing nutrients that the brain plausibly needed.
So my son Hugo, he's just turned 11 months old. He was an undiagnosed breech, so we didn't know until, the big day. And he was a home birth, so it turned from what was meant to be a lovely, relaxing experience with a birthing pool into a horror scene pretty quickly. as soon as we realised that he was coming out bottom first. So yeah, it was obviously very traumatic for both of us. It took, I think, 17 minutes apparently to deliver him, which is a little bit too long. So he was deprived of oxygen at birth, just due to coming out bottom first. And he was whisked off and had hypothermic cooling therapy at King's College Hospital in London, which was amazing. So he had that for 3 days, and then after 10 days they do an MRI and see, you know, the extent of the damage. And we discovered he'd suffered a severe brain injury to part of his brain.
Ben's my 4th child. He was born in 1997 in Ipswich Hospital, and it wasn't an easy birth, but neither were the others. As the year went along, well, even by about 3 months, I was fairly certain there was problems, but I didn't know what. So the medical people were coming in and out of your house as usual. Nobody noticed anything. My GP turned up and said, "Oh, he's asleep, don't wake him." That was the 3-month check. She said, "Just have a feel about in his mouth to see if he's got cleft palate," because that was their in thing at the time, cleft palate. So off she went. And I'd noticed several things. One was very floppy fingers. Oh, not holding his head up at the breast. All stuff being as he was my 4th child. I thought it was me. I thought I'd forgotten. So I let it go. And then we went away in the caravan. Just me, Ben's dad, and Ben, and the dog. So there we were, having a rest, and I just thought, no, it's wrong, and something's wrong, and I didn't know what. And then I went into a changing room in mother care while we were gone shopping or something, and I was waiting my turn to change him on the side thing, and a young mother was there with her 5-month-old. Mine was 9 months old, and hers was 5 months old. Well, the difference.
Basically, I went into labour early hours of the morning. I was 11 days overdue. Went into labour, got up because the contractions weren't that bad, but I could feel the pain. Got up, walked around. About 8 o'clock in the morning, phoned the hospital. And said that the contractions are quite close. They were about 3 to 5 minutes apart, but the pain wasn't that bad. And they said, "I'll just carry on as you're going." It got to about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, "Oh, I need to go in." So we went in, and she said, "You're not in labour. It's just dummy pains." And I was due to be induced on the Tuesday anyway. And she said, "We'll see you Tuesday." I thought, "Well, there's no way this is going to go on until Tuesday." Anyway, I went home, did exactly what she said, went for a long walk. And about 9 o'clock, I said, "Right, we're going to have to go back over," because then they were getting stronger. I went back over to the hospital, and they said, "Oh no, you're definitely in labour." Laid me down, put me on the monitor, walked around the corner to go and get some stuff to do an internal to see how far I was. My husband was with me, and literally the baby's heartbeat just dropped down to 55. And my husband said, "Oh, what should I do? Should I go and get the nurse?" And I said, "Oh, I think it's probably all right." Anyway, he called out and said, "This number's gone down to 55, and it literally just went crazy from there. They literally ran over, pushed me on the side, saying don't move. It was all very panicky. Took my top off, put a gown on, said, "I think you're going to have to have an operation." They messaged a doctor. The doctor eventually came in and just said, "Right, we're going to take you down for a caesarean." It was really, really quick and really frightening, really. So they tried to give me an epidural, but I was shaking too much, so they couldn't. So then they literally just knocked me out, and I was just put out, and he was literally born within about 3 minutes, I think.
The idea was that by moving his limbs in what you would call a typical cross-pattern crawling movement, you would begin to give feedback from the joint to the brain. And this would also, of course, stimulate the respiratory system, because that's what exercise does. The next thing that you did was to keep him on the floor on his tummy to encourage him to crawl, which he did, but not to roll. So he had a rather interesting jacket with a tail to it and sides that quite attractive, and this was an anti-roll device. Gradually, he went through the stages. He became able to crawl on his tummy. The progress was very nice. But as he began to put on height and weight, then I could see that their theoretical basis, which was if you were able to go through crawling on the tummy, crawling on all fours, then what would happen would be some switching on of deep genetic material, and you should rise to the next level of development. But that didn't really happen. I could still see there was a deep problem with his breathing, especially as he began to walk, which he achieved through walking underneath overhead ladders. He had to grasp onto the rungs of the overhead ladders, which were all through my cottage and so on.
Last year, the QED programme made a film about Doran Scotson, brain damaged by an attack of jaundice as a baby. His mother, Linda, refuses to accept that Doran is a second-class citizen, and to ensure he reaches his full potential, Linda took him to the United States to the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Potential in Philadelphia. There they formulated a program of strenuous physical and mental stimulation, which could be carried out with Doran at home.
I wanted to demonstrate the truth of this. So the first thing I had to do was to establish why a child with cerebral palsy would also have a weakened respiratory system. When there is stress to the fetal brain, when there is a drop of oxygen to the fetal brain, there will be a redirection of blood supply away from the developing lungs and diaphragm to the brain, to help the brain. The diaphragm starts working against the lungs even 4 months before you were born. And it does this not to supply oxygen, because that's getting from the mother's umbilical cord, but the contact is a trigger that switches on the genetic material in the lungs. And then there was the location of the brain injury. If the brain injury was in the motor cortex or the basal ganglia, it was going to directly affect movement. And whereas it's generally acknowledged that exercise is the best way of developing the respiratory system, if the exercise is stressful, it has the opposite effect. So although probably to some degree it's better to exercise than not to exercise, the kind of exercise that is open to children with cerebral palsy is more oxygen consuming than oxygen providing. when you look at so many symptoms and problematic conditions that you may have experienced from time to time, you can relate all this down to the quality of your breath, or rather the quality of your diaphragm function. The diaphragm is also your main postural muscle. You sit on the diaphragm. So a big problem for the children with cerebral palsy is that their diaphragms are weak. So if your diaphragm is weak, and if in the course of normal development you can't use your diaphragm fully as a postural muscle to take priority over your breathing. So it's only around 6 months of age when your diaphragm is developed enough to coordinate posture with breathing, when you can sit up. So when I was searching and searching and searching, I was beginning to find more and more evidence that the diaphragm was a tremendously important central organ, and that there was a dysfunction in the diaphragm after a brain injury, which could vary depending on the part of the brain that was affected, but also I reckoned it would vary depending upon the frequency, intensity and duration of the drop in oxygen supply to the fetus. I developed a therapy that could improve the brain-injured child's breathing. I saw extremely encouraging results in their improvements in structure and their physical and mental abilities.
Every single day since we've started this treatment, I mean, Emily was left with an NG tube, right? And our first visit here in November 2003, on our way back on the flight, we took the NG tube out. I took it out. And she's been eating. She's not had one seizure, touch wood, not one seizure. And she's off all drugs. She was on 12 medications.
But I can't get this through to the establishment now as being sort of worthy of interest, because it is what they would call a personal observation. But previously, if you don't base on personal observation, science up to this point has always been based on personal observation and intuition, and then you go and test it. But obviously you need some time, a little finance, to be able to test it, and now it seems you need a lot of finance to test it. So I was continuously building on my critical thinking that there is the explanation for why development is so arrested and deformed after a brain injury lies with the respiratory system. Breathing has to come first. All systems rely on it.
Theo was born, and Michelle, my wife, didn't think that he seemed right. And when he was born was one of the student nurse or the student strike. So there was there was a lot of doctors there and a lot of opinions. And Theo was born normally, and Michelle didn't think he seemed quite right looking, and they didn't. So they thought he had Down syndrome. So they gave him some antibiotics, and they tried to explain to me the spacings on his feet, and I found myself in my shoes and socks of showing that mine are like that. And my daughter, when I went home, I gave her a bottle and got a photo of hers, and hers were exactly the same. So I didn't believe that either and that's sort of the start of all of this. He's been pharmaceutically abused as far as I'm concerned, because he's been pummeled with fortified food and drugs, even though some are barely worth calling drugs according to the professionals from the outset. So we come out of hospital and then had to go back in a couple of days because he was yellow and needed to go in the billy bed, and he was struggling to feed as well. My wife was like expressing, and that's when he broke Mummy's heart the first time, and probably the most longest, because he wouldn't breastfeed. So we got a perfectly amazing Tilly May, our daughter, who's a couple of years older than him, 18 months older than him, and she was Mrs. Perfect. So for my wife, she had a template of how everything would be, and Theo challenged that. didn't grow from the outset. He wasn't growing properly, but no one. I've learnt a lot now, and I understand a lot of the terms now. He was failing to thrive and failing to develop, but almost from the get-go. And they run all of his tests, they checked all of his chromosomes, so we've been worrying about him almost from the moment that he's been born, and all of those things come back negative. Yeah, no anomaly, everything's there. So. And at 9 months old, as well as the vaccine course and everything else, which seemed to have brought him down, but we didn't recognise that, and I wouldn't say I was pro-vaccine, but I didn't know any different to challenge it. I didn't like seeing the distress that my daughter had, I remember when I was like 16 and I didn't like having the BCG, so something innate in me definitely questioned those things on some level, but they weren't to be questioned at that point. 3 doses of omeprazole on top of the other ones, and he started having, we called them vacant moments, but we were told they were seizures. We ended up in East Surrey Hospital, we had about a week and a bit in there, and then transferred after we he just kept on getting worse. The seizures kept on coming, seizures that they were called, kept on coming more and more. So we ended up East Surrey for a week or so and getting worse and worse, and then we end up at St George's Hospital. We fought to get him there, and I'll never forget that. It was a big hospital, 3.5 months in there. He just kept on getting worse and worse, all of the drugs, and they'd put a new drug on him and they'd say, well, we've got to give it a week to 2 weeks for his body to get used to the drug and all the rest of it. Remember that statement, because there's an irony in that. Maybe I should say that now. When you give plant-based vitamins, for Theo, we saw results within an hour pick up, because the body absorbs these things, whereas you're forcing stuff onto it. But sorry, that's my rant. Yeah, sorry.
What you're saying is great.
By this time, it was pretty obvious to me that the diaphragm suffered the consequence after a brain injury, and that if the damage was done to the emotional centers of the brain, you would be tending to breathe more apothoracically, because that would short circuit and produce this. If you had cerebral palsy, then your diaphragm would be still flaring out to the side like a young infant, even though your body was growing around it. So I had to think of a way of addressing the children's breathing, which was not to do with exercise, because they couldn't do it, was not to do with creating stress in the child by asking them to do something, and was not going to interfere with their emotional life. And then suddenly, having thought of all sorts of other things, some mechanical things which didn't work, I just had a picture of these gentle pressures of the lungs against the diaphragm, and the picture in my head that I'd seen so long ago. And I thought, it's the pressures. I have to replicate those pressures.
So Megan was born a little bit prematurely. I already have a daughter who's 3 years older than Megan. So I wasn't really anticipating any particular problems. But on the day that Megan was born, I was due to be playing in a musical concert. I play piano, and I'd had some nasty stomach pains in the morning, but I thought, no, I can still go on and perform. But by lunchtime, they were pretty awful, these pains. And in the end, to cut a very long story short, she was born by emergency cesarean that evening. But the problem was that my placenta had started to break away. So by the time she was born, a fifth of it had broken away, which meant that she had lost some vital oxygen. She couldn't breathe for herself, so she was whisked away from the operating theatre, and I had a quick look at her, and then they took her away, and they ended up taking her to another hospital. So I had to stay in the hospital that I was in She was taken to another local hospital about 30 miles away. So she had heart surgery at 4 weeks old. So she then had every complication under the sun. Everything that they said could happen did happen. So she was very, very poorly.
After spending time with the families, it became clear to us that there was a running theme that when these children were born and their disabilities discovered, they were all told that there would never be any improvement in their condition.
So after that period of time, they decided that actually, she had cerebral palsy, and we were told emphatically by our physiotherapist at the time, who was a lady with a lot of experience, that Megan would absolutely never walk and would perhaps never actually even learn to sit and hold her head. So we were looking at the prospect of having a profoundly disabled child.
Finally, at 1 year of age, they finally got me to the paediatrician. So it took 3 months to actually see one, and he basically moved his arms and legs and said hyper this and hyper that and cerebral palsy and something else, and then he flounced out, and he said moderate to severe 4-limb cerebral palsy, spastic quadriplegia in all 4 limbs. So, and he said, but don't worry, we've got drugs and surgery to sort that all out. That's what he said, literally, and then went off.
If you tell me I can't do something, there's a strong chance that if I really want to do it, I'm gonna do it. And when he was in hospital, I'd come out, so my wife and I used to do like one night and one day on. And I'll come out of that hospital and just get away from St George's a mile or so, and I'd just scream at the top of my voice, no, because I've never been able to accept everything with him, and that's my problem, and that's the safeguarding issue in my head is I won't accept it, and that's obviously a dangerous thing when you've got everyone telling you to accept it. It's it's really crazy. No one's listened to the story properly, and it actually helps me to recall it, and yeah.
How did it make you feel when they said that to you?
Oh, just tears you in half. Yeah, just completely ripped us apart, completely destroyed us. So yeah, it was awful. Sorry. Thanks.
You'll have to get up. Use your other hand as well. 2 hands.
Because if you talk about your personal observation, so you're sort of frozen out. This is speculative. But they admitted I had more references. That it was probably one of the longest theses that I've ever. It was probably too long to be acceptable, really. So it is backed up, but there isn't the will. There isn't the will.
The actual thing held him in place, and of course the problem was his hip, and so that it was yanking, the leg was trying to turn out, and this thing yanked his leg and foot back into position, so it was pulling on this, because all along they're doing this to these children and causing the very thing that they then have to have this very gruesome operation, which involves sawing a bit off of the, and gouging a bit out and putting a bit, he'd have never coped with that.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. We come out of hospital, he then gets pneumonia. I take him to East Surrey Hospital 3 times in 24 hours and they keep on sending me away. By the time I take him the next time, he's non-responsive. And then I really kick up. And but by kicking up to get understanding, to get them to recognise, to get them to understand. And where did the pneumonia come from? Because I later find out it's a side effect of all the medications that he's on, but they didn't even recognise that. And the whole time that I get there, I'm like, well, he doesn't feed properly, is this, is that, and that. But they don't listen, or they're not educated to listen. I'm not sure. Or I'm just that pain in the arse that you hear one bad thing I say and you pick up on that and you roll with that, which is what seems to happen.
Yeah, it was just the most traumatic time, really. We're still getting over it. You know, he's only 11 months old, so we're still all recovering from it.
So having had all that ventilation, the heart surgery, all that recovery in intensive care, she was kind of quite beaten up, really, and she had a really rough first few months particularly. She didn't have any muscle control, she had no head control at all. So when you picked her up, you had to cradle her in the same way as you would cradle a newborn. And people would say, oh, how old is your baby? And I'd say 10 months. And they'd kind of look at me really in a very strange way, and then they'd kind of run for the hills.
Doran was on a specific neurological program which was given to us by the Curlin Foundation, which gave us a structure. So that Doran's situation was different. He was seen in a very positive way because he was getting better. He was being constantly rehabilitated.
Do you have to do lots of different special things because your brother's handicapped?
Yeah.
What kind of things?
Well, we have to do all the running with him.
Do
the running with him.
Do you mind doing it?
No, because it takes a lot to get used to.
Do you? Yeah, go on, sorry.
And when I first started, it was very difficult to try and help.
And is it a new treatment? It's a treatment that was pioneered in the early 60s in America. It's fairly new in this country, and certainly reducing it to a 3-hour program, which is very realistic and which many families can really enjoy doing at home, is new.
After Linda developed a special technique to help Doran, which had such positive benefits, it was then that she knew she must help other families. So she opened up the Advanced Centre in East Grinstead.
So gradually it came together that we raised the money, so we had 2 other chambers, and we found the centre that we have now, which was a little old pharmaceutical factory actually, and in a very dilapidated state, but in a very beautiful position. But we brought the chambers in before we put the walls up. When we'd raised the money for the building and we were getting it refurbished, and I wanted to make it as child-friendly as possible. So you go into a rainbow, which also keeps you warm. And then I had the walls painted this sort of gentle pink, like a Monet water lily painting. This room is the main therapy room, and we had the mirrors there to give it light and air feeling of, but also it's quite useful because if you look in the mirrors, you can see almost where everybody is. It's quite good for training because you can see in the mirror more clearly what the parent who is learning the exercises is doing with their hand while you're sitting on the other side. You can see both sides. So that it proved to be really quite valuable for training. it's a soft play area, so the children could enjoy themselves and the families didn't feel that they were in any way going to have to worry about the safety of their children. They could just relax and watch the children play. And it's very useful because although we have an evaluation room just off this soft play area, I can sit and talk to the parents and watch the children. I watch what they do. And it's much more informative than being in a cramped evaluation room. So this is the little evaluation room here, and consultation room. Some nice pictures, pink and blue, so tranquil. And our skeleton, who has been danced with by many children and much appreciated. He was once on the little platform and could stand up by himself, but still is useful. So, and then we'll put the grid down there so that when the children's photographs are being taken by the parents on the parents' phones, so that they have a record of the way in which the children sit, you also had another way of calibrating it. So next time the family comes and we take the same photographs, you see a difference in posture and physical structure. So the idea, and it happened, was to create a kind of extended family. I couldn't call any of the families who come here my clients. They are my friends, and they're people that I tremendously respect, the courage of the families and the dedication and the love, but also the humour and the fun. Again, the aim was to make it a place that was calm and tranquil, and at the same time sort of warm, entertaining, so the children didn't feel they came to a clinic. And I definitely don't dress as if I'm a clinician. It's a family gathering, and parents rapidly feel this sense of rapport and warmth, and they're relaxed, they get to know one another, and sometimes families then book in to come together and have known one another sometimes for many years, which just makes a big difference, because although they're at home and there's a lot of laughter here, more often than not when they go back to where they live, they feel very isolated.
When he was first diagnosed, everything seemed to be thrown at us, and it was constant. You need to do this and you need to do that, and you've got to see this physio and you've got to have this appointment and this OT, and they're going to do this, and he can't now do that. He's now got to have a special seat to sit on, and he's got to do this, and he can't, where he's trying to pull up on the furniture, you've got to make sure his leg's put in this position. What became very apparent very quickly was that everything you did the minute he grew, and obviously as a young baby was growing constantly, the minute he grew, you went back to square one. Once we found advanced, it made the difference with advanced to anything else was it made sense. Everything she was saying, I understood, and all of a sudden I was thinking, oh, that is what he does, and that's also now I understand why he does that.
Yes, so I mean, honestly, we had a lovely time here. I loved coming here. We'd come 7 times a year in the first couple of years, and it was like a big family. You know, other people were here, and we all shared our stories, and we all, it was a full family thing. They'd all like the nana and the mummy were here and everything. So we made some great friends.
So after a couple of months, I learned more about Hugo's diagnosis. I found a support group on Facebook called the HIE Network, and just got talking to different people or read different threads of what different treatments families have tried. I quickly realised that most of the treatment available was all considered alternative. So I just immersed myself into that and discovered something called hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So then I was trying to find somewhere local to us. I was looking at MS centres, and thankfully one of them mentioned this place. Said, oh, no, we don't do it here for little ones, but they told us about the advanced centre. So I looked them up, and I looked on Linda's website, and then I learned about her, all of her work that she'd done with Doran, and I thought, this sounds amazing.
Not only was her method life-changing for those with cerebral palsy and others who had suffered brain injuries, but that everyone could benefit from improving their breathing patterns. So when your daughter was bullied, what were the effects that it was giving her?
It completely shot down her confidence, kind of self-confidence, confidence in her interactions with other people, confidence academically, just all across the board. Her confidence was completely deflated. It also increased anxiety levels. There was this bullying went on for several months, and so there was a very strong association of pain and of not feeling good when you go to school, and fear, and a fear that was ingrained in her body at that point of what's that person going to do to me today? What other thing could happen today? And we were starting to see, when things really peaked, we were starting to see the first signs of withdrawal. And that was like a huge flag to me, because this is someone who's normally, all these months this was going on, we were talking about it, we were working through it, and here all of a sudden she was starting to withdraw for the first time. And when we started doing the exercises, when she would have these kind of explosions that she would tell me, Mom, it feels out of control, like I can't control this. I would sometimes just invite her to just lay down in her bed, and while she was laying there without saying anything, I would just start doing the exercises on her, and I noticed within 5 to 7 minutes, it was the same effect that was on me, but it was even more stark on a child. Her whole nervous system just gradually started to settle and ground. And she went from being in that Moro reflex mode of flight and fright and freeze. She went from that mode to being herself. As parents, your first instinct is to change the world for your kid. This bullying is happening to my kid, so I really need to focus on getting rid of the bully. And they kept telling us, if it's not this, it's going to be the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. What this interaction and her response is telling us is that there is an inner weakness in her system. There's a crack somewhere where something is not held together in the way it needs to be in order for her to thrive, and in order for her to embrace these things that get thrown at her as she grows. So we spent this whole year doing, things to really focus on making her stronger from the inside, and really ensuring that her whole system, her nervous system, her stress management system, all the different things that were interacting and causing her to feel this way, just really working on strengthening all of those things. I've seen that most holistic practices are exactly that. They're holistic. They take the whole person into account, and Linda's approach does the same. What I see Western science, if you want to call it that, or mainstream science doing, and especially mainstream healthcare, like medically related science, it very much zooms in and tries to make a problem isolated and tries to really look at it in a silo. And the human body is not a silo. Like, every part of the human body is so interconnected to the next part.
So suddenly, here I was. I'd gone down in this lift, and I knew that I wouldn't, by the time I went back up, I wouldn't be the same person. I had to take something else on board. So I was beginning, right from when I first started to question and work with Doran, I didn't see that this just related to Doran, but it was my opportunity to express my loving concern for him in a way that possibly could open out elsewhere.
Whilst Linda's work was dismissed as anecdotal by the university, there was another clinic in South Africa this time doing the same technique, bringing equally incredible results.
Just to start with, I'm 3 persons in one, except for being a husband and a father. I'm a physiologist, number 1. I'm a biokineticist in the second place. I will explain what that is later. And then I'm working with equine science, especially how to write properly and how to teach people to write properly. My wife saw an advert in the newspaper and she contacted Linda. So eventually we went to the center she had here in Benoni. And we had a long chat with her and a meeting with other people involved in the technique. And that led to me being involved in a compilation of a doctoral thesis.
What did you think of the thesis when she had completed it?
I was quite happy with it, and I must just point out something. I'm very critical when it comes to writing anything in terms of science. And I found it totally acceptable. And I could see that she was able to think in different directions. She was not educated or trained in science at all. So yet, if you look at the literature survey, it was done extremely well. She was definitely breaking new ground in the sense that she found an extremely simple method to deal with the cerebral palsy children. And I think those of us who worked with people like that know how difficult it is to get any result. And for that, I admire her very much.
We wanted to see this for ourselves, so flew to South Africa to meet with Addie de Hoop, a mother to Nimaway, who was born with cerebral palsy. Addie now also treats other children after being trained by Linda.
Her birth was extremely premature. She's born when I was 24 weeks pregnant, and it was a cascade of events at the hospital that precipitated her birth. I knew that when a child is born so prematurely that there would be issues, and when she and myself, we were still in the hospital, that is the day after she was born, I insisted on having some sort of echography of the brain, and eventually that happened. So I knew that she has sustained brain damage because her lungs were not ready to breathe. Yeah, it's a whole cascade of health challenges that come your way.
You know, if you look at our bodies nowadays, compared to what we were taught at university when I started, we were taught about the functions of the brain on its own, and then the functions of different parts of the brain, but there was no link. We were taught about the function of the heart, the stomach, etc., but there was no link. But now we know that the brain is intimately linked with other systems, like the immune system. If you're stressed, you're going to have problems in your immunity.
I knew nothing about cerebral palsy and the effects that it would have on me as the mother, psychologically, physically, the effects it would have on my relationship with my family, my friends, my husband, as a couple, as a family. There are zillions of dimensions there that I knew nothing of, and the medical system in South Africa offers you nothing. And then I reached to a very close friend of mine, Linda, and she taught me how to handle that. And then the world changed for me. I was very lonely and isolated. I don't like to talk. Sorry, it's gonna take me a while to go over this, but now I can talk about. But the isolation at that time was very hard. and my family, my husband. Yeah, but the fact that I could speak with another person, another mom who experienced the same event as me was very helpful. But that did not exist in the medical model. I don't think it exists anywhere in any medical model.
After spending time with Doran, Linda, Addie, Professor Lutz and the other families, it became very apparent that the mainstream treatment of pharmaceutical, surgical and physiotherapy interventions of those with cerebral palsy was leading to minimal benefits. Yet, here was something so simple, so inexpensive in its methodology, but was actually bringing about extraordinary changes. It begs the question, why are so many treatments being suppressed today?
Your brain is intimately linked to what is happening in your gut. And there's quite a big crosstalk between the gut and the brain, and the gut and the immune system. So we're talking about one system and not three of them, different ones. And that Linda managed to do. She started working on a small way of therapy, and yet it affected the whole body.
In terms of my daughter, what was offered were conventional approaches like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. So those are the approaches that were available to us. But the arrival of a child in a family, in a home, is not about physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. My child was reduced as a therapy.
Functions of breathing. It is life important that you should breathe correctly. And that's the first thing that she taught these people, kids, how to breathe correctly, by not teaching them how to breathe, but just putting her hands on them and doing slight movements with the hands.
And then I was like on a mission to understand this thing called cerebral palsy. And then one day I hear, oh, there is this family who is starting this therapy. And I said, what is it? Oh, I don't know what is it. And then I was really following that person until I could speak with Linda. And then I said, are you a mother of a child with cerebral palsy? She said, yes. Then, okay. Then I carried on with the conversation. And then I made an appointment and I brought my daughter Nimue and we did an assessment. And we started about 15 years ago.
So just introducing you to the first set of exercise pressures that families work with their children. We are looking at diaphragm development and the way the diaphragm affects circulation and movement and circulation of blood to the extremities, to the brain, to the internal organs, and of course to the lungs, through the lungs. So our theory is that the fetus before birth is breathing, that the diaphragm, we know, is moving against the lungs. And these gentle pressures help to increase blood supply through the lungs and are a trigger that switches on the genetic development in the lung cells. We also know that these pressures assist the flow of blood through the diaphragm. So we're working on tiny, tiny little blood vessels. And by gently compressing them so that the blood supply through is arrested for momentarily and then released, you get a pulse. I'll just show you a few. So the bottom of the sternum here, the rib cage parts here, forms a little triangle so we can get underneath the diaphragm. So just put the towel there and your hand lies lightly upon it. But in fact, there's no pressure at all. So you want to start with no pressure at all. And you're going to descend until you feel a bit of resistance. But you can count initially. It's nice not to count in the end, just to have a really pleasant, gentle rhythm that's kind of embedded in the deliverer, so they can relax and the movements are just made spontaneously in a nice, even way. But to begin with, no pressure and gently down. And we go to a count of 6 down, 6 up, and then a pause for 3. So it goes like this. Down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then pause, pause, pause. Down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're sort of just very, very, very gentle descent, like putting your hand on a water lily leaf and just gently pushing it a little bit underneath the water.
In the olden days, we were taught about the nervous system, different parts function in different ways, but there was no integration. But now we know that the nervous system, even a slowly spinal cord, is a hugely integrated system, and everything in the brain works together. You can't now separate one system from the other.
The decision of opening the clinic has resulted actually from facing the challenge, a challenge and support. I was facing the challenge because Linda couldn't come. She couldn't travel to South Africa to come and follow up our children here and give us the new program. So then I decided, okay, I cannot, Linda cannot come, so maybe I should go and then I should learn further from Linda, come back to South Africa and apply what I learned on my daughter and carry on with the work that she has been doing with the other children.
So simply by changing the breathing pattern in the patient, Linda affected the whole body. It doesn't look like it. But I've seen the changes in those children, and I've seen it in the patients I work with, how they changed. From people that can't walk, eventually to people that could walk.
And it creates a very positive atmosphere around the brain injured child. You begin to realize, and the community begins to realize, there's a person there and a person who's working hard to get well.
This weekend, the boy who would never walk unaided completed the Seaford Half Marathon.
He's just been able to run 13 miles.
It will be wonderful because Doran will begin to demonstrate his own freedom as an individual, which is something I've longed for him to have, and I rejoice in myself, and to pass it to him is wonderful.
Well, I would say my mum, she's a fantastic woman, and she's doing everything else. So I like her. I love her with my heart and soul. She helped people a lot. She helped people by using the breathing pattern, stuff like that. She will walk with me. She talked with me. She she's definitely an amazing woman.
He's mature, he can dig the garden, he can clean the house, but he's also become a painter.
Oh my God, there he is. Mr. Doran, how nice to see you. Oh, it's a handshake, is it? What about the hug? Hey, good to see you. How are you? Yeah? Great. What a place you have here. Hi, Linda. Hi. Hi. Oh, look, another hug. Great.
Oh, God.
Great. What's happened to that?
Ode to a sad thumb.
Ode to a sad thumb. Oh no, what have you done? Did you fall off your bike or something?
He got an infected thumb.
Oh no.
And he took him to the hospital. They were very nice.
Yes.
He took him to the hospital himself, thinking they would just give him maybe an antibiotic.
Yeah.
And they took him in, kept him in overnight. All the nurses knew him.
Of course. Everybody knows Doran.
And they took the thumbnail off and lanced the thumb.
Oh my
and
God.
then he came home with a very big lanced thumb.
Oh God.
But since then it's shrunk down to a more appropriate sort of size.
This is the thing with this guy. Everybody knows him. Wherever he goes, bad thumb or not, you know, it's Doran. It's him. Everybody knows him.
We were remembering your skills,
Yes.
teaching Doran to sing.
Yeah.
And wondering if we could reproduce a little song.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yes.
Good. Great.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. We missed the first one. Yes. Good. And we're going to go up the hill there.
Oh, hello.
Oh,
Was it a row the boat?
No.
we did row the boat. Yeah, I remember that. Well, now you mention
No.
it. We did.
No.
No singing voice.
Michael rowed the boat ashore. Alleluia.
That was our the one that we did on television.
Yes, yes.
On the breakfast time show.
Do you remember that?
No.
Of course he does. It's a great time.
So how old was Doran then? How old were you?
Well, I was trying to think back. I think probably 9, 8, 9.
8, 9.
8, 9. Well, we got on immediately.
Yes, yes. They were gelled together.
Yeah, well, everybody gets on with Doran, of course. So he's the most. Oh my God, I love this guy. So that was. So we got together and started working. And we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed the sessions. I think we sang for about half an hour, once a week. And we got a bit better, and we got good enough to go on telly. 30,
You haven't changed.
35 years ago. Also, how old are you, Doran? Now?
41.
41. I mean, just that's extraordinary.
I know it is extraordinary.
I can't believe. Well, of course, we don't see each other every day. Yeah.
But the time just goes, doesn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, extraordinary.
You have a bright spirit.
Thank God. God, you've got a whole suite of rooms here.
We'll have a lot of children with autistic spectrum disorder.
Oh,
so they're
right.
a bit bouncy, so they can
Yes.
bounce freely.
Yes.
And so so this is a studio here.
And
then
you run the place?
Yes.
Yes.
With Lily. We used to...
Was that Lily? So these are all Doran's pictures here?
He works on them in here, and you can
they're
see,
brilliant.
and here's his easel. So one comes down and then they go up. So he works on a bit and then lets it dry, and then he goes on.
They're quite different from the ones I saw in the Christian community.
Yes, it was.
I think those were
watercolours.
Those were watercolours,
He
weren't
started
they?
with a lot of watercolours.
This is all Doran's work. Look at that. They've got strength, colour, character, just like you. Hey? I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Come on, tell me something. Which is your favourite one, Doran?
The snow.
The snow one. This one?
No.
And that's a horse I can see.
Yeah.
And a bird.
Yeah.
Some trees and a lovely landscape.
Mm.
They all have the kind of story of a journey. And
Oh, they're from a story?
No, in his head.
Right. Well, whatever's going on, there's always a big sun.
Yes.
Right in the middle. Is that where you start?
Yeah.
Is that the first thing you do? And then you go everything, create the picture around that?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it very bright. But you're open all year?
Yes.
Right.
7 days a week.
7 days a week?
Doran has this sort of spiritual quality about him in his life.
Yeah,
he always sees another
saying.
sort of dimension. It's always been there.
Yeah.
Even when he could hardly say a word.
Yeah.
The words that he put together seemed to show that he was seeing something else.
Well, it just shows how important art is, you know, to get out what's inside. Because we don't know what's going on inside anybody, but at least you get a glimpse. Yeah. Great. It's been very, very nice to see those, Doran. Well done.
Sure.
The artist.
Just don't accept it. Go with your instinct, have faith, never give up hope, ever. I mean, the brain is amazing. You know, neuroplasticity is incredible. Possibilities are endless, as long as you know that, I think. I think if you accept that everything's going to be dismal and, you know, there's no hope, then that's kind of the trajectory you might go on.
But this world is so totally, totally different. It's an extraordinary world to be living in. But human beings can change remarkably given something warm to come into, as it were.
So, you know, I was inspired initially by her story of Doran, and I am still inspired by Doran's story. And I think for a parent like myself with an older daughter, you know, she's 19, so she's in adulthood now really, is that Doran continues to make progress.
So yeah, me and Ben, we're waiting for our turn in the healing pods. I said, Ben, I'll be in the next one beside you. And he said, well, when you get out, he said, I'll be gone. He said, I'll be on my motorbike. So you got to, I mean, he lives a great life.
Bizarre. I don't think, Linda, I don't think anyone can offer you hope. For me, all of the way through, even stood out of hospitals, I want to listen to other parents. I want to know their experiences. I trust other parents and their experiences so I can draw my own conclusions more than I trust the professionals, in essence.
So I am undeflected. I will continue whatever happens because the information, I can't let it slip.
I'm going to try and be polite here. I was disappointed, of course, and then I was disgusted when this thesis was not accepted. Simply because I know it was work that deserved recognition.
But any change is a massive change to those parents and that child. And it is a life-changing thing, so it's something that carries on. It's not something you do for 3 years and then all of a sudden your child jumps up and skips off to school.
It's worked for me, so I would say anyone watching, come and try it, and yeah, it's been brilliant.
It isn't always about the physical side of what's going on. Some children, it could just be the change in breathing, they're healthier, and that to the NHS should make a difference.
I'm currently in the process of setting up my sports club for special needs children. It's called Inclusive Sports Disability, and this phase has enabled me to express my feelings and go on to bigger and better things.
And also, the people who tell you there is no hope, they are not in that situation. Look for parents who were told there was no hope and challenged that sentence. Those children are better off.
I think if we would have kept trying other things, my sense is that they may have taken care of one part and not the other. And I feel like with Linda's work, especially I think with mental and emotional health, I feel like it just addresses things generically across the board. Whether it's depression or whether it's fear or whether it's, the label doesn't matter. It's so universally applied. Whereas this, I feel, I'm so grateful we discovered this quite early in our journey actually, because it really just supports everything across the board.
You work with the parents of these brain damaged people. They need a lot of caring because they just give and give all the time. And Linda's got to realize that what she does need is some caring sometimes during the day. I don't mind her working 7 days a week, but she must take a break.
I look up to those who I admire, to models. I look up at Einstein. I look up at Mother Teresa. People who have done things better, different. And I look up to Linda. She's done better with these children. That is an inspiration for me. Look at better, different ways to offer a better future for your child.
After finishing the filming of Breathe, the Ickonic team and I all felt like we had witnessed something extraordinary and that everyone needed to know about Linda's tireless work. Not only was her method life-changing for those with cerebral palsy and others who had suffered brain injuries, but that everyone could benefit from improving their breathing patterns. It was so inspiring to witness the lengths that parents went to help their children, despite being told by the medical system that there was no hope.
I am so inspired when my daughter wakes up in the morning and tells me, "Can I tell you my dream?" I never thought that my child would talk to me, let alone telling me her dream. I am inspired when I go away for a weekend and I come back and my daughter can tell me, "Give me a card, Mama, welcome home." Nobody knows what it is to live with disability of a child day in, day out. It is inspiring for me when a child who was moving around like she was plugged on 6,000 volts and she sits next to me and she hugs me. She recognizes me. She knows I am safe for her. That is inspiring. She can tell me, "Mommy, you made me such a wonderful meal. It's so delicious." I would not take that a compliment from anybody, but coming from my daughter, I know. She means it. That is my mission in life. It's helping those children to get better, talk for themselves, get them out of disease. That is inspiring for me.
I would have loved to meet him, and I would have loved to see him run, despite all the problems he had as a young child. And how she fixed him.
Last year, the QED programme made a film about Doran Scotson, brain damaged by an attack of jaundice as a baby. His mother, Linda, refuses to accept that Doran is a second-class citizen.
You feel this way. Don't let their words fill you up with doubt. Lift your head and watch your dreams branch out. Don't you give up now. You have made your vows. You might not know how, but you will find the key. Feel your soul.
Where there's a will, there's a way, I think.
In your eyes, watch it come alive. This is your destiny.
And if people will take even parts of it, it would be something towards giving a much more hope for a much better outcome, but particularly for the brain injured child who can't speak for herself or himself. They can't speak for themselves.
Can you see how far you've come?
If you are interested in learning Linda's technique or would like to become a therapist yourself, please contact Linda and the team via Linda's website, advancedcenters.com.
You haven't tried.